What was your first job after you graduated college?
So I actually went from undergrad right into graduate school. So technically, as part of that, I got a teaching assistantship. So I would say graduate school, having a teaching assistantship was my first job after undergrad.
Working as an assistant to the administrative assistant of the Texas Dairy Herd Improvement Association.
The first thing I did was start my master's. So at the time I was still working at an outdoor store. Mostly part-time, though in the summers I was full-time.
I worked at a wilderness outfitter where we sold all sorts of outdoor equipment and clothing, everything from rain jackets and ski clothing to backpacks, tents, climbing equipment, that sort of thing.
After finishing my undergrad, I actually got my truck and drove to Alaska and worked as a commercial fisherman.
Do you feel that job led you to your career today?
It led me to the career today.
I do, because it's the same career.
Yeah, this is going to be a boring interview.
Yeah.
Have you ever changed pathways during college or your early career?
Yes.
No.
Yes. I've changed a little bit, but not entirely.
I did change pathways. Immediately after undergrad, I started a PhD program at UC Berkeley in human development, and when I got there and saw what the program was like, and after I completed 1 year, I realized that it was not the program for me and that I was not going to get the kind of training I wanted to have the career that I was hoping for, and so I quit. I dropped out of grad school, and right after that, my next step was I moved to Ireland, and I actually, worked in a coffee shop for about a year before I moved back to the U.S. and started my job at the Texas Dairy Herd Improvement Association.
I've never changed paths as far as the field I'm in. I've been a band director and music educator ever since I graduated from my undergraduate. The only thing that changed is after 10 years of teaching in the secondary schools, I moved to the collegiate level.
My interests have always been mammals. My undergrad was wildlife biology, so the behaviors, the ecology of modern mammals. And then in the graduate school, it switched to fossil mammals.
I moved home in 2003, end of 2003. I was courted back to come back and run all the sports sections of 3 different papers were consolidated into one. And so I did that for about 2 years, and I was exhausted. And an opportunity came along to do public relations for my old school district. And I thought it would be an interesting challenge, and it really was. And that's what completely changed my career path.
Do you feel that you took advantage of your 20s?
Yeah, because basically got in there, got the PhD, and got out of the 20s.
Mm-hmm.
Well, since most of my 20s I was a student, I certainly took advantage of being at academic institutions that provided a safe and both safe and challenging and rewarding learning environment. All the places that I studied were in different parts of the country, so I got exposure to different ideas and different ways of doing things, and even to a certain extent, different sort of subcultures.
It's those sets of experiences there in my early 20s that helped me set up and figure out what I wanted to do with the rest of my life.
My 20s I used to live in different parts of the country, in different communities, Gainesville, Florida, Tampa, St. Pete, Charleston, and it was always tied to my career. And I got to really explore and meet so many different people that I'm very happy that I see people back in my hometown that are like my age now, and I'm 40, that have never really left Buffalo except for, I went to Florida for a week, or I went to Disney World. Like, don't you, and academia's provided me a chance to travel to all these different places. I can't understand that. So my 20s is where I kind of developed my wanderlust.
My early 20s, I kind of divide the decade up. My early 20s were really just beginning in my career path. I had the education through my college degree, and now was the application period. And so obviously as a young green teacher, I made plenty of mistakes and learned a ton. I had switched jobs in there as well. So the early 20s were really a time of learning how to apply my craft.
If you could go back in time to your 20s, what advice would you give to your 20-year-old self?
I think the advice I would have would be to place more importance on your close relationships than your own experiences. I was pretty selfish. I was pretty self-focused and self-centered. So I also would say that the ideal life that I had pictured for myself in my 20s is not what I would consider an ideal life now.
But looking back, I lacked confidence, that I was too quick to make judgments about things and not look at like bigger perspectives. I definitely was very self-focused. It was hard for me to think about things that weren't related directly to me or had to do with me. So, you know, and I feel like I often had the wrong attitude about things, and not necessarily like an attitude that was like defeating or something like that. But I think a lot of times a person's, happiness or being realistic, or just, kind of understanding the way things really are, and being accepting of these things can be, you can be better about that kind of thing with the right attitude.
I don't know. I guess just enjoy the ride. I've never been a planner. I've never drawn the line and said I want to be here in a year. I want to be here in 5 years, which worked out really well during my 20s because I was just going and doing. And so, if I was 20 again, I would just say, it's about to be a lot of fun. Just enjoy the ride, because I don't regret any of it. So I don't think I need. I don't think I could give myself advice to enjoy it more than I enjoyed it.
I think I would tell myself that it's going to be okay. I think there's a lot of times I was really nervous about that. So many friends were getting married and finding their careers and doing all that kind of stuff, and it's turned out just fine, right? And so I think it's doing the things confidently. Over time I got there, but I think originally it was just do those things confidently, because it'll work out.
It's going to be okay.
Would that advice be the same as what you would say to a 20-something from our current generation?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think one of the things that is interesting that I've observed about your generation, which is not that far removed from my generation, even though it is different, like we're not in the same generation, but is that there's, I don't know that it's that much different from mine, that there's so much pressure on students, on your generation, to have it figured out. That you've got to know what you're going to do between now and retirement.
Yeah, I would say the same thing. I think we spend the first 2 decades of our lives learning and preparing for our career path, and so I think it's natural that once we get out into out there and we're getting a salary and we're starting to make money, but we're also independent and we're having to survive on our own without our parental forces helping us, that I think it's easy to become obsessed with that aspect of it, and I think that's one of the reasons why the generation below mine, the millennials, are putting off having children. They're putting off settling down. They're getting married later. They're having children later, and so forth. And I think some of that is financial, but I think some of that is a real, even further than me, a really focus on career.
Your generation gets heaped on, millennials are so lazy. You're not. You need to find the right thing you're passionate about. And I've seen your generation more than others. you'll just take that ball, to use a sports analogy, and run with it. Do not be afraid to travel this country. Do not be afraid to move to somewhere where you know nobody. All right, that's what I did here in Milledgeville. I did that in Gainesville, and I've made friends, well, not here yet, for life. If you were designed to just grow up, go to college in another place, and move back to where you're coming from, to me, you're really missing out on life.